Hello and welcome to Cycles of Time, your weekly guide to what's happening on Earth as we make our revolutionary journey around the sun. For time immemorial, our human ancestors have created myths and meanings to help us adapt and thrive as seasons change. Join me each week to explore the intersections of these ancient cycles, from the indigenous medicine wheel to the pagan wheel of the year, the Babylonian and Greek zodiac to the I Ching, the ancient Chinese book of changes. I'm your host, Allison Dale, and this is the Cycles of Time podcast. Hello and welcome to another week in the Cycle of Time. I hope you're all feeling personally liberated and expanded after Saturday's Jupiter-Uranus conjunction in Taurus. As I mentioned last week, Jupiter and Uranus conjunctions bring quantum leaps, revolutions, and breakthroughs in science and technology, and also in the ways that we as humans view our relationship with the larger universe. So that conjunction between Jupiter and Uranus just happened on the April 20th, last Saturday. So I'm curious how that showed up for you. It's a big transit, a big astrological event of the year, and there's lots of people talking about it if you're in the astrology world at all. So I would love to hear from you in the comments or on Instagram or Facebook or wherever you social, how that showed up, if there were any big revelatory insights or moments that happened for you. This conjunction starts a 14-year cycle because the planets meet up every 14 years. And so it's not just something that would affect you on one day or within a few days. It's actually something that could start to have an effect over the next 14 years. I had an insight about it the other day, just thinking about the mythology. I'm reading the book Kirke or Circe. I'm not 100% of the pronunciation of that, but the book by Madeline Miller, a very popular book about Greek mythology and the goddess Kirke. And it has gotten me a lot more interested in Greek mythology than I've ever been, just because it's such a captivating read. And so I started looking more into Jupiter and Uranus as mythological figures, and it provided a lot of insight into what this conjunction might mean. So Jupiter is Zeus, the king of gods, who's an expansive and powerful force of nature. And the thing about Zeus, from all of the myths that we have heard of him, is that he's always messing with humanity. He's getting involved in the mortal world, changing into a swan or a bull or any number of animals to trick some human woman or man to mate with him or to make altars to him. He rules the part of the sky, the signs known as Sagittarius and Pisces, and both of these are signs that like to explore, merge, and stir things up, whether it's on the external level like Sagittarius or internally like Pisces. And yeah, I mean, if you've read much Greek mythology at all, Zeus is always messing with people. He's just always coming to Earth and stirring things up and is very involved on the earthly plane. But Uranus, on the other hand, is named for the great sky god, who is an entity much more removed from the world of humans and much less involved. The planet Uranus is not easily visible to the naked eye and was not considered a planet by the ancients. Even if it was known, it was thought of as a star. And then in 1781, Uranus was the first planet to be discovered with a telescope, and about 70 years later, consensus was reached that it would be named for Uranus, or Uranus, who was one of the primordial gods, one of the first generation gods. And unlike Zeus, he was a distant god who was not worshipped or given human attributes. Uranus was a sky god who, with the primordial earth goddess Gaia, gave birth to the Titans and is therefore an ancestor to all of the Greek gods. Uranus was kind of a salty fella, just being the sky as he is, and he hid his children, the Titans, beneath the surface of the earth. And then in order to free them from this trap, his son Kronos, which became also known as Saturn, castrated him by request of his mother Gaia. Uranus is the ruler of Aquarius, the sign Aquarius. Since it's been discovered, it's been attributed to that sign. And it's a sign that represents the sky and the atmosphere. Is an air sign. It represents the future and the ability to view humanity from an outside perspective. So if you think of Aquarian nature is to kind of like hate people but love humanity kind of thing. Doesn't always work out that way, but there's a certain kind of like futuristic loftiness of like being born in the wrong time that is attributed to Uranus. So when these two powerful figures come together like they just did last weekend, it leads to, in my perspective, a kind of mass awakening about how the human world is connected to the world of the sky god, and the world of the stars out there. And it kind of highlights power imbalances as well as our shared ideals and dreams for the stars as a species. Bringing our outer and inner worlds together can feel like a lightning bolt of change, and Uranus and Jupiter both kind of have lightning as their emblems. And this lightning bolt of change kind of causes us to reflect on what it means to be human and what we're willing to fight to protect on Earth as we take advancing steps toward the distant stars. So in looking at these mythologies, I really just saw, the definite dichotomy between Jupiter and Uranus, between the involvement with the Earth itself and all of her creatures, including humans, versus the kind of more distant, primordial, space-oriented, futuristic themes of Uranus. So Saturday's conjunction of the planets sets off a 14-year cycle, which highlights the area of your birth chart that's ruled by Taurus. In my chart, Taurus is in the 10th house of career and public offerings, like I mentioned in last episode. And so with this extra surge of energy in this region of my chart, I spent a lot of last week building out a new website and doing a lot of design and writing kind of about my new offerings. So after many years of study and working with private clients, I'm really excited to launch this website and my offerings to the public over the next few weeks. And the offerings are going to include astrology readings, human design readings, cycles of time readings, which are kind of my own format, bringing together these different philosophies into a reading about your personal birthday and chart. And also I'm going to be doing private and group breathwork sessions that will involve astrology to various degrees. I've been studying breathwork for several years now, and it's been something that's really helped me transform my life and embody a lot of the thoughts that are going into this work that I'm doing. So stay tuned for all of those offerings and the new website. It'll be live at astrosomatics.com. So let me know in the comments how the energy of these revolutionary planets have showed up in your life, if at all. I'd love to hear from you, as always. And now we'll just move on to this week's overview. All right, the highlights of the week are it's Earth Day today. It is the first full week of the fixed Earth sign, Taurus. The Taurus season is in full effect. The sun is transiting from the gate of ordering, which we experienced last week, into the gate of caring, which is known as nourishment in the I Ching. And on Wednesday, there's a full moon in Scorpio, which is also known as the pink moon, and many other names, but the pink moon would refer to the pink flowers that are blossoming in a lot of parts of the country and a lot of ecosystems this time of year. And then coming up next week, we will be celebrating Beltane, or May Day, in the pagan wheel of the year, so shifting that part of the wheel to a new season. And I would say the themes, I'm going to start introducing themes for the week ahead as well. So this week's themes are self-love and self-care, thy cup spilleth over, intimacy with others as a pathway to intimacy with yourself, and vice versa, and somatic embodied awareness. As usual, you can take a look at the visual diagram of this podcast and of this season. I always highlight a certain section of the wheel to kind of show how all of these different systems of philosophy are overlapping this week. And that is on astrosomatics.substack.com or on Instagram at Cycles of Time Podcast. It's pinned to the top, so feel free to take a look at that if you like. So to start out with, happy Earth Day. Today, April 22nd, has been recognized as Earth Day since 1970, and it was founded that year to demonstrate global support for environmental protection and, I would say, environmental connection. Basically, on the first Earth Day in 1970, more than 20 million Americans poured out onto the streets to celebrate and protest, and this first Earth Day remains the largest single-day protest in all of history. This day and many environmental regulations that came along with it were a big response to a huge oil spill that happened in 1969 when 3 million gallons of oil spilled from a leaking platform and well off the coast of Santa Barbara, California. And this killed more than 10,000 seabirds, dolphins, seals, and sea lions. And it was very visible in California, this oil spill. The Wisconsin Senator Gaylord Nelson was responsible for bringing the idea of Earth Day to the forefront politically after he flew over an 800 square mile oil slick in the Santa Barbara Channel and just saw the devastation that it had caused. Interestingly enough, 1969 was also a year of a Jupiter-Uranus conjunction, just like it is this year. And those themes that I mentioned a few minutes ago about protecting the earth and humanity's place within nature and technological breakthroughs and our relationships to them were very clear also in 1969. That was the year that the Apollo mission landed Neil Armstrong on the moon, and there were also massive youth protests against the Vietnam War, and it was the year that Earth Day began. In 1968, in December 1968, so just a few months before all of this happened, the first image of Earth from space that was taken by a person was revealed to the public. You've probably seen it as that big blue marble image. And there had been images taken before of the Earth from space, but it was always by a part of the Earth, or it was in black and white. And this was the first full color image that was taken by a human being going up in space. And I really think that moment in time gave us a really true sensation of what it means to be on this planet, small and large in different ways, but definitely our home. In doing some research, I thought it was super interesting that by far the largest source of funding for this first Earth Day was organized labor unions. A guy named Walter Reuther had led the United Auto Workers since 1946, and he was a progressive supporter of civil rights. He opposed the Vietnam War, and he was a champion for the environment. He was also a founding member of the Coalition for Clean Air, which successfully lobbied for the Clean Air Act of 1970. And UAW, this union, donated an equivalent of about $15,000 US dollars, funded all the telephone communications for the event, printed all the Earth Day materials, and mobilized its members to participate. So it really ties into the revolutionary side of Jupiter-Uranus in time for this celebration of Earth Day. We're in the 54th Earth Day this year and Earth Week, and I know it's expanded a lot. It's observed now in 192 countries, and it's coordinated by the nonprofit earthday.org. And Earth Day is now known as the largest secular day of protest in the world, where more than 1 billion people participate in Earth Day actions each year. And every year there's a theme, and the theme for 2024 is people versus plastics. Plastics, of course, come from oil, and it's interesting that the first Earth Day was really a huge response to a big oil spill, which are still happening all over the world. Just before recording this episode, I got an email about Jane Fonda raising $10 million in a single night last week to fight against big oil's plans to overturn a bill that protects people in what oil companies call sacrifice zones from toxic oil drilling. So this was an event in California, and she stepped up and used her celebrity power to raise $10 million very quickly to combat this bill being overturned, to protect people in vulnerable areas near oil refineries in California. So go Jane Fonda. And there's your lesson about Earth Day, past, present, and future. So thank you to everyone out there who is doing Earth Day initiatives and working to consider and save this precious planet of ours. I personally love that Earth Day happens within the first day or two of Taurus season, which is the first Earth-ruled sign in the Wheel of the Year. My fingernails have been dirty, and I've been digging in soil and planting flowers. And I just really love getting my hands in the dirt. I didn't always, but I definitely feel the effects of it. I've heard that digging in the dirt is good for your mental health because there's a soil bacteria called Mycobacterium vaccae. I think I'm pronouncing that right. But there's different soil bacteria that have been studied and found to have antidepressant properties. So when this bacteria is absorbed through our skin of our fingers and palms when we're gardening, it triggers the release of serotonin in our brains, and that's a natural antidepressant and a mood lifter. So gardening and being in the dirt and being with the earth can help us improve our mood and reduce stress and anxiety and promote a general sense of well-being. Some people practice grounding or earthing, which is walking barefoot on the earth or on the grass, and it definitely has some of those same effects. So I highly recommend it if you're feeling a little bit down. I also think that, beyond the science of the bacteria, it's just the process of consciously connecting with the land beneath our feet, which we oftentimes take for granted when we're wearing shoes and walking on asphalt and concrete all the time. And I feel like it also, digging in the dirt also connects us with our childhoods, because what child hasn't covered themselves in mud at least once? It is just a natural human temptation to do so. My favorite summer pastime as a kid was going down to the creek that was by my house and finding the silkiest, most clay-like mud and doing a mask, covering my whole body up with it until it dried and cracked in the sun, and then washing it off in the refreshing water. I still like to go do this when I can. There's a hot spring here in northern New Mexico called Ojo Caliente that is a beautiful place that I've gone to since I was a child, and it has a mud bath area where you can get some beautiful clay mud from their grounds and rub it all over your body, let it dry, and then wash it off in a nice warm tub. So it's a lovely thing to do. And yeah, definitely has been something that has been with people, with humans for a long time. And making mud pies is another one of my favorite things to do these days because, again, I have a 5-year-old daughter, and every time it rains, and sometimes when it doesn't, she has us fill up a hole in the ground and make a puddle to jump in and then make mud pies that linger around the dry desert for a very long time. I think we have some 2-3-year-old mud pies in her playhouse outside. But I thought mud pies were an interesting segue, a good segue into the gate that we're in this week. Last week we were in the gate of ordering, making order out of the chaos. So I'd love to hear how that resonated for any of you listening out there in the comments. If the gate of ordering, along with the Jupiter-Uranus conjunction, spoke to you in any way, let me know. But we're moving out of that ordering gate, which was perfect for me to build a website in. And we're moving into the gate of care. I last week likened the gate of ordering to the process of creating order out of chaos by the analogy of pruning a garden and weeding a garden. So after pruning and weeding, the gate of caring takes this one step further. Now that the early spring weeds and errant ideas in our minds have been cleared away and put into some kind of order, it's time to focus on what remains in the ground and show it deep care and nurturance so it can survive and thrive. So each gate of human design comes from a hexagram in the ancient Chinese Book of Changes, or I Ching. As I mentioned last week, the top trigram, the top 3 lines, represent kind of external factors, and the bottom 3 lines, the bottom trigram, represents internal factors. So the gate of caring is mountain over thunder. And so thunder would be internal and mountain would be external. And I like to see this as the thunder within us is now confronted by the giant still mountain of the external world, the vast power that towers above. It's a good week to reflect on your inner visions this week, to nourish them and care for them so much that they flow out of you into the world around, like a spring breaking bedrock and flowing out of a mountain. So if you think of thunder under a mountain, it's just this like internal impulse to do something, to make something happen, confronted by kind of the vastness and the largeness of the world around us. But the way to care for that internal spark is by allowing it to flow outward. And this hexagram represents the planetary law that to give is to receive. And in order to have enough to give externally to the outside world, we must first fill up our own cup. In order to spring forward through the mountain, we have to be full ourselves. We can only nourish others with the things that we have in surplus. I've been seeing this quote floating around on social media. I'm not exactly sure who said it, but I've seen it in many places. So if anybody knows, let me know who to attribute it to. But it says, everyone talks about the grass being greener on the other side, but the truth is the grass is green where you water it. And that seems like a perfect quote for this week of caring, this week of mountain over thunder. I'd say that one thing to remember about nourishment and care, along with watering that grass, is that it only works if it's done in a routine and made into a habit. So you can't overwater a plant once and hope that it will survive. You have to pay close attention and be regular about it. So this week, pay attention to what you're paying attention to and where your energy is going. This week, actions speak louder than ideals. Are the things that you're giving your time and energy to the things that you want to see grow in your daily life? I remember when I first got an app on my phone that told me how much time I was spending on there each day and which apps I was using the most. It was super revealing to get this data back, and it definitely made me stop to consider my time and my attention a lot more. There are so many things actively competing for our attention these days. So in order to be an active player in what gets your attention, it's important to slow down and just start noticing and giving care to that attention. After all, the gate of care and nourishment is the first gate that is fully within Taurus season. And like I mentioned last week, laying down on the physical earth during this time of year can connect us with a deep slowness that's hard to access in the world of rampant digital screens and ideas and memes and reels. So I'd recommend, just taking a piece of advice from the earth herself and just sitting with that slowness and that type of care. So each week I also like to mention that, the sun is moving through these different gates and through these different signs. So I like to call out and say happy birthday to people who are born during the week that I'm talking about. So happy birthday, Gate of Caring people. If your birthday is between April 22nd and 27th, you are born in the Gate of Caring. People born with their birthday this week or with another planet or luminary in this gate, the wisdom that you have lies in your generosity and your giving and caring nature. A shadow of this energy could be self-sacrifice and overgiving. So it's important to remember that it's ultimately more authentically caring to give the love that you already feel full with yourself. This can show up as simple acts of service, a smile, a warm hug, or in the sphere of social justice and community organizing as well. When I look at the synchronicities and similarities, I really do feel that the gate of caring is so perfect for this first week of Taurus season. Taurus being the sign of the bull, but the sign of this kind of docile bull sitting in a meadow, as I see it, surrounded by flowers, blinking those long eyelashes, and just surrounded by the sensual things that evoke care in my book. I also love to look at the zodiac signs, the 12 zodiac signs, as a wheel of the life cycle as well as a wheel of the year. And if Aries was the first sign, so birth and infancy, then Taurus would be toddlerhood and early childhood. If we reflect on Taurus in the life cycle as a toddler, we recognize that young children are in a stage of recognizing what's mine. There's a lot of boundary setting in these years with new experiences of the sensory world, helping us define what belongs to us and what is ours to possess. As we grow up, we learn to not hold on too tightly to things, but in this process, I believe that we sometimes release too much because we don't want to seem greedy or overly materialistic. So we begin to kind of give things away before we feel full ourselves. So this gate of care and nourishment, as well as the season of Taurus that's associated with toddlerhood, really, to me, feel like times to think about, like, how do we fill our cup up first before we start to give it away? And how do we show care for ourselves in real ways, not just, a bubble bath or whatever the self-care is being marketed to us right now. But how do we really show ourselves the care for what it is that we specifically as individuals need before we start giving to others? Because I've found, at least in my life, that the more I fill up my own cup, the more I have to give, and the quicker I am to give to others and to people in my surroundings. As a mom, it's so apparent. Like, if I'm over mommed and just constantly feel like I'm being called mom, 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 and being summoned, and I use that as kind of like, well, I have to go help somebody else all the time, and I don't take a moment to, use the bathroom or be in my own alone space. Like, a lot of moms don't do this, a lot of parents in general, I think. But the more we give ourselves just a little bit of that alone time when we need it, or we close a door, or we go out with friends, or do whatever it is that's truly nourishing, the more will be available for our kids and others that we're nurturing and caring for. I went out dancing by myself with some friends the other night and just had such a fun time just getting into my body and jumping around and really letting loose. And I find that in the days afterwards, I've just been more available and attentive and caring as a mother because I did what I needed to do. So it can look like any number of things, but I would say this week it's just really important to lean into care both for yourself and for others, but starting with yourself. A big lesson from Taurus season and the gate of caring is the idea of dwelling with your needs and desires for a bit longer than you're used to before you begin to give away your time or energy. If you pour the water into your spongy self until it begins to seep out and care for yourself deeply, it leads to the ability to care for others, and it's not at the expense of caring for others. There's a power and strength in being realistic about one's ability to care for and nurture others. So self-nurturance versus nurturance of others, and how others nurture us is the core theme of this full moon as well. This week we have a full moon in Scorpio opposite the sun in Taurus. Every year when the sun is in the sign of Taurus, we experience a full moon in the sign of Scorpio because they are opposite signs. And full moons are always opposite the sun. So last month we spoke a bit about how the Libra full moon in Aries season highlights the axis of relationships, of me versus we. And so this month, the Taurus-Scorpio polarity highlights the axis of security and what belongs to us, or the mine versus ours axis. So this week's full moon in Scorpio is on Wednesday, April 23rd. And it's bringing these themes of mine versus ours to the forefront, which we've already spoken a lot about in that gate of caring, but we'll go a little deeper into with the lens of Scorpio. So Taurus, the sign, is kind of the intimacy that we have with our own understanding of what we need to survive and thrive, which is informed by our senses. Taurus is a very sensory sign, all about touch, sight, smell, all of the ways that we perceive and get intimate with our environments. On the other side of the coin, Scorpio also represents intimacy, and it's more intimacy with our inner world and with others. So it's intimacy through how we share resources and how we deepen beyond the superficial in relationships to get to know ourselves better. So that's mine versus ours axis of Scorpio and Taurus. Full moons are thought to be energetic culminations of what seeds were planted at the last new moon. And in this case, that new moon was the new moon solar eclipse on April 8th. So if you think back over the past couple of weeks about what happened in your life revolving around me versus we, the Aries versus Libra, and also mine versus ours, the Taurus versus Scorpio, another thematic lens that you could look at this culmination from the new moon to the full moon is through form, which is associated with the material plane of Taurus, versus transformation, which are mutations from material form to spiritual formations. So I like that phrasing of it. It's mine versus ours, and it's form versus transformation on this Taurus-Scorpio axis. Full moons are like mirrors. I really like to see them this way. I like to look at the zodiac and the cycles of time in a very physical way. And I was probably in my 30s or so, ridiculously, I guess. But when I realized that, for every full moon, when you go out during sunset, the full moon is rising on the opposite horizon as the sun is setting. And I just did not know that earlier on in my life. It wasn't, something that I paid attention to too much. But looking at that polarity and seeing the sun setting on one side with that beautiful light, and then looking over and seeing that moon reflecting the sun is a very beautiful way to physically embody what's going on with this reflective nature of the full moon. To look at it as a mirror, a beautiful, shiny silver mirror of the hot, shining sun. So as a full moon is like a mirror, it reflects back the polarity of the opposite season to the season we're in. So like right now, when I look over and see the sun setting in the west in the sign of Taurus, and then I look over across the sky to the other horizon and see the moon rising in the sign of Scorpio, I'm reminded of Scorpio season, which is in November, right? So we're in beginning of May, late April, beginning of May, and then Scorpio is late October, beginning of November. And so the full moon is here to remind us of that opposite season. Each month when the full moon rises, you can look at it and say, oh, hey, there's a little glint of a reminder, a memory from the opposite time of the year. So in the warmth of emergent late spring into summer, this full moon in Scorpio calls on us to remember the parallel season of emergent late fall into winter. And so right now, while we build relationships with the material world through our senses, with all the smells, sights, and sounds of spring, Scorpio season is a time to build relationships with our inner world and with our partners and community through the death and dying of the sensory delights around us. Scorpio's totem is the scorpion, of course, but it's also symbolized by the soaring eagle and the phoenix rising from the ashes. It's the only zodiac sign that has more than one totem, as it's the sign of transformation from one thing into another. The scorpion, eagle, and phoenix all have laser focus on what their inner desires are. If you think about a scorpion stinging or an eagle soaring above looking for prey, or the phoenix rising so purposefully, they all have that similarity, that similar quality of determination and laser focus, right? But each iteration has more perspective from a higher vantage point to inform what those desires are. I remember learning about this transformative quality of the Scorpio totems when I was pregnant with my daughter, because she's a Scorpio sun. And it was just like, felt like, wow, okay, that's so cool to know, because I think sometimes Scorpios and Scorpio as a sign can be feared a little bit, or kind of like held at arm's length, like, oh my, the scorpion is definitely a scary creature. But learning about its power, and also how it has this power to transform into different levels of being is really exciting, and really cool to think about when it comes to that sign. So the Scorpio full moon reminds me a bit of the Greek story of Demeter and Persephone, which is a beautiful telling of the cycles of time that I recently read a children's book about. We're going deep into Greek mythology here at this household, with the library in Santa Fe has Greek mythology as their summer reading program. So it's been quite awesome to dive into that from different layers. And I read a children's book about Demeter and Persephone the other night, which revolves around their deep connection to the cycle of life, death, and rebirth, which is the cycle that Scorpio is associated with. In the myth, Persephone was abducted by Hades, who's the god of the underworld, also known as Pluto. And Demeter, in her grief and search for her daughter, neglected her duties of harvest and spring and caused the earth to become barren and the crops to wither. Eventually, Persephone was found, but since she had eaten pomegranate seeds in the underworld, she was required to spend part of the year down there with Hades. And during that time, Demeter mourns her and winter comes, which leads us to a period of introspection and inward learning, and also sometimes grief. So when Persephone returns to her mother, Demeter's joy brings spring and summer and the fruits of the material world back. And so that telling really highlights the difference between winter and summer, between late spring and late fall, and what's happening in those realms. And it's just something to really sit with this week, as we're thinking about how to care for ourselves and care for others. The Scorpio full moon this week is happening directly across the sky from the sun, and as we know, it's in the human design of care. So the moon is opposite that in the human design gate 28, which is the gate of the game player. The moon in the gate of the game player describes how our emotions are going to show up in contrast to our conscious thoughts. Basically, every full moon is, highlighting these polarities and these different seasons. And it's also highlighting kind of the difference in learning between our emotions, which are represented by the moon, and our conscious thoughts, which is the sun. So sun in gate of care, conscious thoughts about caring and nurturing, and then the moon in our emotions in the gate of the game player. So in line with the zodiac sign Scorpio, the human design gate of the game player encourages us to become intimate with our fears and our shadows as we navigate the path of life. It's about knowing that the game that we play is not all flowers and blossoms, but also contains struggles and hardships. It's a deeply introspective gate, gate 28, and there is a desire for people who have this gate in their charts to find meaning and purpose in life through both ups and downs, and not ignoring one for the sake of the other. So this full moon, the sun in the gate of care, is about giving nurturance to the things that we want to see grow in our garden, while the moon in the gate of the game player is reminding us to look inward, be introspective, and consider the whole picture, the good and the bad, as we move forward into late spring. This week, remember to treat others and yourself with kindness, because the energy of the full moon in Scorpio can be intense and emotionally charged, like all full moons, but Scorpio in particular has that kind of underworldliness and that direct, laser-focused quality to it. So we can embrace the changes and transformations that may arise from this. It's definitely a very transformative time, all in all, and use this lunar event as an opportunity for growth and self-discovery. I'd say the antidote for an intense internal game of chess is to take the timer off. It's not speed chess. And this week, consciously give yourself space and care to process any of these emotions that do come up with the full moon. Then on Sunday, the sun's going to continue through the sign of Taurus and move into gate 24, which is the gate of rationalization. And this is an introspective, soul-searching gate, which is pretty perfect after the full moon in Scorpio has kind of similar energy. So we'll kind of go from this outward tending and nurturing of the thing that wants to grow into the more introspective. It's always a balance. It's always a flow between dark and light, up and down, and all the polarities as we go week by week through the year. On Tuesday and Wednesday of next week, we'll be celebrating Beltane in the pagan wheel of the year, which is also known as May Day. And then we'll continue through this season of growth with the elemental reminder of wood and work quickly towards the season of fire. I'm definitely feeling the changes as I look ahead to next week and just really consider these polarities, consider these gates, consider the history of Earth Day. There's definitely a lot of change underfoot, and that's kind of what this is all about, what tracing the wheel through the cycles of time is all about. So I'd love to hear how these changes are sitting with you, how you're feeling out there. Please feel free to comment either on the Substack if you're listening and reading here, or on Instagram at Cycles of Time Podcast. If you get value from this podcast, please click the heart or the subscribe button and share it with any friends who might like to travel the wheel of the year along with us. Thanks so much for listening. I'll see you guys next week. Bye.